Recently, I released a report, a special report to the Legislative Assembly on a problem that I think has been developing for 15 years in Ontario that's really quite serious. And that is that we've totally underfunded the two ministries, the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Natural Resources, for years, such that they've actually lost the capacity to do the work we expect of them. To back up that report, I did a number of case studies, 8 in fact. And what I want to do with this blog is talk for a minute about the first of those case studies. It's an example from the Ministry of Environment. The Ministry of Environment is in charge of preventing pollution, basically keeping contaminants and pollutants out of the environment. And to do that, it has a number of mechanisms. It has permits and licenses and things that it uses to control pollution, limit the amount. What it all amounts to is we end up with maybe from about 125,000 to 350,000 points or facilities that could be sources of pollution or sources of waste, improper management of waste, those kinds of things, that have to be inspected. Because the only way we know if in fact the laws and the rules are being complied with is if we inspect. So the inspection burden is a big number like that, hundreds of thousands of sites. Well, the actual fact, the Ministry of Environment can only inspect about 5,000 sites a year. Well, 5,000 sites means that's about 96% of all facilities that are potential sources of pollution will never see an environmental inspection in any given year. That's a pretty low rate. And as a result of that, as you might expect, what happens? Well, we don't get a high degree of compliance. There's a special group within the Ministry of Environment that does these sweeps, they say, sort of a group specialized in a sector. And when they do these sweeps, we've got access to some of that information, and we found that gives us a measure of what level of compliance is in some of these sectors, these businesses. And what we find, in fact, is that there's a lot of non-compliance because there's not normally any inspections. Often between 90 and 100% of facilities caught in these sweeps are found to be in non-compliance in one way or another. That's hugely problematic. It means we're really not in control of the pollution going into the environment. It means we really don't know what's going on because there's just too few people. How many people, you say? Well, you know what, I don't know. Because when I tried to find out about staffing levels, current staffing levels, historic staffing levels, somehow that information wasn't available to the Environmental Commissioner. And that in itself is problematic. We should be very frank about this. If we're not going to inspect, if we're not going to provide the resources to this ministry, that should be something for public discussion. I think the public expects the pollution laws to be enforced, and they do expect that the ministries responsible have the resources to make sure that our environment is not polluted and it remains healthy for future generations. That's one problem. I'll talk about more in other blogs.